Okay, so in this video here, I'm going to do a little more detail on all the different things I've had to do to my car since I got it back in 2016. So I'm going to start from the front of the car and work my way back. First thing I'm going to go over is right here in the front. Underneath here is what I have. It's called a chin guard. I actually bought this on an online site called the Prowler store, which I'll talk more about that in a little bit. This actually did come in handy at least once, because there was one time when I actually did bottom out. I actually hit a bump just right, and it did hit, and there's actually a little bit of dent under here on this chin guard. But it does actually allow for a little bit of a extra surface there, so if you run up against curbs or hit a bump like I did, it definitely is worth trying that out. So next I'm going to go here under the hood for a couple things here. First of all is going to be the battery. The battery when I bought this car was still the original one that was in the car. Again, the car was 16 years old at the time, and so it still worked, but it got very little use because the previous owner actually had put a cutoff switch on the negative terminal, and as a result, it probably was turned off most of its life. So people out there that say that this car needs to be kept plugged in all the time, maybe not, but I still do anyway. I still have a charger that I keep it on during the winter, so I would still recommend that. But it actually caused me some trouble because I actually had to, at some point, eventually get the battery replaced because it actually kept causing the car to not be able to start. So that was something I had to fix pretty quickly. Another thing I had done was actually have this support put in. This aluminum support is actually something I found on what was called the Prowler Mall. That's something that's available within the POA, prowleronline.com. And there's actually various versions of that out there. Other people sell them as well. There's bigger versions even. This actually helps a little bit in terms of the rigidity of the car. Actually just required a couple extra bolts through here where the bumper comes in. I think it has made some difference. It's hard to say a whole lot of difference, but it certainly hasn't hurt. So another thing I want to go over here are the stabilizer links. They're actually located right here. This is a stabilizer link right there, that's one of them. And if we go over here to the other side, you can see the other one right there. Now when I originally got these, or got the car, this was in much worse shape. The rubber on here was starting to come apart, it was falling apart, and they really were just barely hanging on. And even though the car had very little mileage on it, that didn't matter, because these are rubber parts and the rubber can tend to fall apart over time. So definitely this is something you want to consider replacing. There's a guy on the POA, his name is Brian Richardson. He goes by the name of Spoons on the POA, that's his screen name. Check out with him, he's the one I bought these from, and many other owners have also bought this new link here. It's definitely worth trying out. Okay, so the next thing I want to go over here is several things here related to the wheels that you need to look into. First thing, as I mentioned in my last video, I replaced the tires. The model tire that I got is a Nitto brand, N-I-T-T-O. 555 is the model. I actually bought these back in 2017 at a discount tire. And I picked these particular ones because there's only so many tires out there that have the same tread pattern for the front wheel as well as the back wheel. Remember, the front wheel is only a 17-inch diameter wheel, whereas the back is actually a 20-inch, and it's also much wider in the back. So to find tires that actually have the same tread pattern is very difficult to find. Some other Prowler owners have also used Continental. That's another brand that they've been able to find where they can find matching tread. So either one this one has been so far worked very well for me. It's a very sticky tire. Even in wet weather, it actually has been able to hold on pretty well, and I've gone through some pretty bad rainstorms before, so it's definitely worth giving a try. The other thing I'm going to go over is these mud flaps that are on here. Now this particular one, I'm going to be replacing it because, as you can see, I've got a little bit of a scuff mark on here. I was able to order another one. This was due to some curb rash, but when I bought the car originally, these were not there. I'm assuming that because they weren't there, that this might be something that the dealer normally installed afterwards. Other owners can probably let me know if that's right or wrong. But there's different versions of these mud flaps that are out there. And this one here is a shorter one. There's some that are actually about an inch longer than this. And for obvious reason, that one can be a little more dangerous because they definitely get caught up more on different surfaces. So this one hasn't been too bad. It has gotten caught up a little bit. But not too bad. It definitely adds a little bit more protection here. So, because for rocks, chips, and so on, that's the whole reason they're there, to help prevent that. Something else also to mention that I forgot to mention when I had the hood open, Underneath here, next attached to the stabilizer links, is something referred to as the Wonderbar. It is designed by Larry Lord. He's another member of the POA. And I originally put it on there just because of all the good feedback that everybody had about how good it was to have this on your car. Honestly, it's supposed to improve your ride considerably. I barely drove the car before I had that on there, so I really can't tell. But it definitely hasn't hurt, and I would still say that with all the feedback we've gotten, it's still something to consider as well. Next thing to go over here I want to show you is these right here, these caliper covers. Now, these again were not original with the car. This is an aftermarket. Actually, this is another thing that was on the Prowler Mall that I was able to buy. Not sure if they're still on there anymore. But this actually, I originally got it not just because it looks better, because the brakes that are behind there is still the same caliper that was on there from the minivan. So wasn't real attractive. Kind of wanted to spruce it up a little bit. But that wasn't the only reason I put them on there. This also helps with brake dust. I found that before that was on there, I was cleaning the inside of the tires a lot more. It still gets dirty. It's not like it blocks it all out, but it does help somewhat with that. Now, one thing to be careful though, is when you put these on, some owners have seen this happen. They put these in and the clearance for this is very tight. There's not a whole lot of space in there to be able to, between the wheel and the cover. And there has been some people that have actually had this get scraped up on there. So be careful when you put it on there, do some tests on it to make sure that it fits properly. Next thing I want to go over is the TPMs, or the tire pressure monitors. Now, anybody that's got a Prowler, these monitors that are in here have been in there for many years. In my case, they've been in there 20 years. And these monitors, they have batteries in them, obviously. That's the only way they stay powered. And 20 years is a long time. The batteries are probably running out. Now, I just had a drive on the car recently. The low tire light did not come on. That's a good sign. But sometimes it has popped on once in a while and then turned itself off, which kind of makes me think that I'm not sure how much longer they're going to last. So I have been looking into options for this. And something that I did find from a fellow POA member, Dale Sumney, he goes by Pedrew on the POA. He suggested these here. This is a brand called Autel that has these new sensors. And the sensors are designed to handle two different frequencies. Now, if you have a Prowler that's any year except 2002, the frequency that it has for the radio frequency to talk to the car is 315 megahertz. Now, if you have a 2002, it's 433 megahertz. Now, that latter one is actually more common, and I actually also bought a programming pad to go along with this that I was hoping I'd be able to use to reprogram it. The problem is the programming pad only recognizes the 2002. However, these sensors are designed for both, so what I'm hoping at some point that I'm going to be able to get the existing ones on here to record onto here. Now, there's different ways it's got to be done, but what some other owners have done is, instead of trying to deal with that, some of them have actually put aftermarket valve caps on here that will actually, you know, it's a bigger thing. It's going to be outside, and they have to put something on their dash to be able to register and see what their tire pressure is. The nice thing about that, I'll admit, is that it'll actually show what each tire is in terms of pressure. With the Prowler, unfortunately, you just get a light that says low tire. You don't know which tire it is, and you don't know how low it is. So admittedly, that would be better, but it also means you have this not so nice looking thing stuck up in your dash. So I'm going to see if I can get this to work, and I'll follow up on a follow-up video. I'll let you guys know if that worked or not. So the next thing I want to go over are these wheel caps. Now, I've taken this one off. This is my cap that I have on here, and I also have here a cap from my trailer. Now, the reason I'm showing this is because the trailer still has a cap that looks like they were from stock. This is the same kind of cap that would have been on the car when I originally got it. This one, as you can see, has been modified to have this big rubber ring on here, which is much stronger than these tiny little tabs that are on here. Now, when I originally got these, I bought them from the Prowler store. Now, I mentioned the Prowler store before. When I got them, I bought them just because I just got in the car, and actually one of these caps, I bought the entire cap from them, due to the fact that one of them actually fell off the first time I drove the car. I lost one. And so I quickly went out and ordered one from them, and they had this special ring on here. And then I found out that they also had the ability where you could send in your other ones, and they would put this cap on here for you as well, or this special ring. Now, I want to point this out because I mentioned the Prowler store, and anybody on the POA is going to have not so many good things to say. Nothing, you know, Prowler store people probably aren't going to want to hear this. But unfortunately, this design came from somebody on the POA, and the Prowler store found it, and they made their own version of it, and they probably are charging more for it than the person who originally came up with this. I went ahead and originally bought it off the Prowler store because I didn't know any better, but this really applies to anything that you buy online. I was a little bit naive when I first did it. I went ahead and just said, hey, the Prowler store's got everything I need, I'll just go ahead and buy it from them. But you really should shop around, because sometimes other people might have them too. And here's a situation where somebody else actually had designed this and put a lot of time and effort into coming up with a great design to improve on the design that the original wheel had, or original cap had, and they weren't getting the credit for it when somebody else sells it. So just want to point that out. The Prowler store does have some things that you're not going to find anywhere. There are other things I got in the car, including the chin guard that I mentioned earlier, because I couldn't find it anywhere else. So there are some things you can still have to, you can still buy from there. But just keep that in mind, that there are other options out there, and you should definitely want to look into something like this. If somebody else designed it, you want to get it from the person who designed it. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about with the wheels here is behind here. You can't see it from this angle, but I'll get another camera view of it. It is the lower ball joint. Now, the ball joint, every car has them. There's a lower ball joint or an upper ball joint. And in the Prowler, the lower one actually had a recall that was done on it. It was a safety recall, which means if your car hasn't had it, you can still have it done. In fact, when I first had my car looked at the dealer, when I bought it, they looked it up and they saw that this recall had never been done yet. And so the problem is, it took them a little while to find one, because that part was unique. To find, they only made so many extra ones, and there's only so many of them out there. So they did eventually find them, and they did install them. However, there are, and I should point out the reason why they're even there, the recall, was because due to the nature of this car and the design of it, it's a lot easier for dirt and debris to get in under the boot of the ball joint, and that weakened it. It could cause the wheel to fall off. There's actually pictures I've seen of people where that's happened. And the problem though is that even with this recalled one, some owners, after they've gotten like 60, 70,000 miles, or maybe less, the wheel still fell off. It still broke. It still failed. And so there were some owners on the POA that looked into this, and they actually worked with another company. Their company name is called Rare Parts. And I've bought a couple of these. I haven't installed them yet. Again, my car still doesn't have a lot of miles on it, so I think I can go a little while longer, but at some point I will get these put in. It basically gets a new design of the ball joint that has been tested out, and other owners have already put this in here because they tested it and they think this is going to be a much better design, a much better safety thing to have. So first of all, if your car still has the original ones before the recall, you should still at least maybe look into getting that. But if you can't do that, if you can't find them, this is another good option as well. So the next thing I want to go over here is this metal beam that I have here actually came from another Prowler owner that I plan on installing. This is actually a brace that's going to go between the two front wheels under the axle. And he said this would definitely help in the stability of the car. He actually sold it to several other people, and they really said it was a good idea. I actually met this guy not on the POA, but he actually came to, he and his wife came to buy my son's car, and while they were here, they saw my Prowler in its bag, and they asked what it was, and I told them I had a Prowler, and they said, hey, we have one too. I mean, what's the odds of that? So he told me about this part that he made. So I actually went to his house later, and a couple days later I went and checked it out and bought one of these from him. His Prowler, unfortunately, had been sitting in his garage for 4 years. He hadn't driven it for a while. He's hoping he can again someday. But I'm going to try this part out and put it on, and then I'll maybe do a follow-up video later to let you know how that worked out. So next thing I want to go over are these side panels here. Now, this is still the original one. I haven't changed mine out, but there are several owners who have changed this piece out. They change them in order to put louvers or other vents in there to help give a little more airflow through the car. Also to give it a little more of a retro look, because a lot of the old hot rods usually had those vents in there as well. And it's kind of whether or not that's really necessary to have the vents. Some people say yes, some say no. That's something I may do someday, I'm not really sure yet. But keep in mind that some of the designs out there, I've seen, they'll also take out the turn signal when they do their design. Some people don't think they need it. That's something I probably would still want to keep in. I think it's a safety thing, it's better to have it. But just again, wanted to point that out, that is an option some owners do. While I'm here, I also want to tell you about, behind this panel actually is the air filter. Now, I did have mine replaced a little after 10,000 miles, which is around the time you should do it anyway. In my case, it had been about 19 years before it had been done, so it was a little overdue. But the thing is, it's very difficult to take out. I actually had the dealer do this one for me because I wasn't real sure about it. They actually have to remove this panel, and the panel can be removed by actually getting to there are actually bolts above this panel. If you open the hood, you can actually see them under there, and you can actually be able to remove this whole panel. And they also had to jack up the car because once this panel was removed, they actually have to get from underneath to be able to pull it down through, and then be able to have access to be able to push it back up again. So it's something that is not a fun job to do, but you saw how little space there is in here. It makes sense they had to put it wherever they could find room for it. So next I'm going to go here under the hood and talk about a few other things that I had done underneath here. Again, parts under here that you definitely want to look into, no matter how much miles is on your car, is basically anything that are rubber. Rubber parts, even if there's not many miles, they deteriorate over time. And so two of the things I had done under here, well, three of them actually. The first one was the fan belt. I actually took care of any of the accessory belts. I had those replaced. All the radiator hoses, I had them replaced. And when I had them replaced, I actually made sure that the ones that I replaced them with was a newer aftermarket version. The last thing you're going to want to do is to have a piece of rubber on there that's just as old as the one that was on there before. So definitely look into that. It definitely just makes me feel a little more peace of mind to make sure that those are there. The other thing I had also done was the timing belt and the water pump. The timing belt, the nice thing about that is there's actually kits out there for the same very engine due to the fact that this engine was used in several other Chrysler cars. And so you can find kits out there. I actually bought mine from Rock Auto, and the whole kit actually itself was probably, I think, under $200. I actually probably paid about $900 for labor. So anybody out there that actually can do it themselves probably is better off for them to be able to do that. So definitely something you want to look into to replace the timing belt, because actually, even though there wasn't many miles on it, according to the Prowler owner's the service manual, actually it's supposed to be done about every 8 years, no matter how much it's been used. In my case, mine was almost 20 years old, so it was definitely overdue. And again, it's just a peace of mind thing. Some people would say you could keep it for a long time until it gets to 100,000 miles and you'd be fine. But again, for me, it was peace of mind to know that that's in better shape. Another good reason to replace the timing belt is because of the type of engine this is. Now, if you have any Prowler other than a 97, like I have a 2000 here, your engine here is the aluminum block, and this is what is known as an interference engine. An interference engine is such that the pistons inside the cylinder can actually occupy the same space as the valve when it's opening. So it does that for efficiency's sake, so it can push up as much as possible, and the valve normally be moving out of the way. And that movement of the valve is actually managed by the timing belt. So if the timing belt fails, it doesn't work properly, and the timing doesn't work right, that cylinder can come up and actually hit the valve. It can break it, it can damage inside your engine to the point where it's not repairable. So it's one of these things where if you have this type engine, it's worth having it done, because if the timing belt fails, you're out the entire engine. Now, if you have the 97 model with the iron block, it's not an interference engine, so you don't have as much risk, but still doesn't hurt to have it done. The other thing I want to go over here is these hood struts. Now, if you have a 2000 or 01 or 02 model like I have here, you have these hood struts here that are holding up your hood. If you have an older model, there actually was a prop rod that was installed that actually attached to the hood itself that would lower down to hold up your hood. Now, when I first saw my car and looked under the hood for the very first time, I was probably only under the hood for maybe 5 seconds, and the hood fell down on my head. And that's because the gas in these had already leaked out and they were no good anymore. Now, amazingly, the ones I have for the trunk still work. I haven't replaced those yet, but these ones I did replace. These were actually replaced by a company called LS Technologies. They're actually based out of Saskatchewan in Canada. And the nice thing about them is that the owner there actually knows the Prowler. When you look up their stuff, you're actually able to find stuff for the Prowler specifically. You don't have to try to figure out what the size is, whether it works or not. They already know the one that'll match it. And also the same for the trailer as well as the trunk. So keep that in mind. And many other owners have gotten these and they've sworn by them. And so far this is still holding up, and I hope it's going to hold up for many more years after that. So next I want to show you a little more in the inside. I'm going to show you how a 6 foot, almost 200 pound person like myself fits in this car. Now, as you can see, you probably can't see my entire head. In fact, actually, there's only probably about another inch above my head before I can start actually hitting the top of the roof. Now, I don't have the seat all the way back. I could probably go back a couple more inches. I tend to like to be a little bit closer to the wheel, but more importantly, if you're more than 6 foot, you're going to have a little bit of height issue here looking out the window. Now, in my case, I've been able to look like this and I can see my blind spot, but that's still something you have to keep in mind from a safety perspective. You can use your mirror, but if you just turn your head like this, you can't see what's back there very easily without turning your head. So please keep that in mind if you have your top up. Okay, so next thing I'm going to go over here is actually see if we can get the top open here. So I'm going to go ahead and lift open the tabs here. Not sure how well these are going to be able to be seen. We're going to go over here and do this one. Make sure they're out of the way. I'm going to give the top a little bit of a push. And it's stuck. Let's try that again. There we go, there's one. And we're going to go over here, give a little push. There we go. Okay. Now, the other thing you got to do in order to open the top, now I've got this wind deflector in the way, but it makes it a little bit harder to open here, but there's underneath here, there's actually a little lever that releases it from the trunk lid. So if you reach under there, see if I can get it in there. Got it? Okay, now we're gonna go out and open this up. Now, first thing you gotta do, you gotta lift this up here. And now you can see your trunk lid. Now down here, there's actually a little button there you actually have to hit in order to open it up. So we're gonna press that little button, and that releases it. Now we go here, and we lift up the trunk. And this is the first time I've looked at this trunk since I pulled it out. And as you can see, the size of the trunk and all my car care stuff that I've left in here, you may notice also here is a window sticker. Now this isn't actually the original window sticker. I'll provide the name of the person. I can't think of his name offhand, but I'll put that on the video here so you can see the name. This guy actually created this for me. It was a reproduction of it, and that's a photo of the car that he put in there that I sent to him. So, but otherwise all the information on here is correct based on when the car was made. So again, you can see the space here you've got to be able to put the top. Once the top fills up the space here, not going to be a whole lot of more room to go with. So let's go ahead and put the top down. Okay, now when you pull the top up here, or I should say take the top down, you got to be careful here. If you're the only person here, you don't have 2 people, you want to make sure you reach in here carefully and be able to pull it up. Now it looks like it's relatched itself a little bit here, so I make sure I can get in there. There we go. And you got to make sure best to do it right from the middle of the top if you can. And we'll let the top fall down into place here. Now most people, once the top is down like that, they think their job is done. Now actually there's another step here you should do. Inside here, if you look, there's actually these little tabs that you can use to strap it down. Now I'm not going to do it here because I'm holding the camera, so it's a little hard for me to do that. But in here, there's actually another latch here that you can do. You put these together and that'll help push down the top somewhat. So it gives a little more clearance between itself and the bottom of the trunk lid. There's also one over on the other side, so you definitely want to consider doing that. Sometimes it is a hassle, I'll admit, to do it, especially if you get caught in a rainstorm, you got to quickly get out and unlatch them. But it's, for the long term, it's the best thing to do. So while I have the door open here, I want to point out this panel that you see here. This is one that I had added on. This is actually another Prowler store thing that I found. I bought this right away when I got the car, due to the fact that this was just something that I thought the car really needed. Need a little more color here. Many other people will take these other bezels here and actually change them out, make them match the color of the car as well. All these will change out, but I didn't want to go that far. I thought that might be a little too much. To me, I kind of like the car to look as much as possible like it could have been if it was in production. I mean, the average person doesn't know what this car is anyway. And so when they see it, they might actually see this on here and think that was probably part of the design. Now, if you start changing everything out and make it yellow inside, then it starts looking a little bit too much like it's been customized and doesn't look like the original car. So I just put these on here because that makes it a little bit nicer look. Now, while I have the door open here, something else I want to point out are the how far this door opens. Now, this is how far mine opens. If you have one that's from the original production one, it probably only opened to maybe about there. And the reason why is because there's actually this door stop down here that is causing it to not open as far. Now, there are other owners out there who they have actually designed specific pieces that can fit behind that. You pull it out and actually put it behind there to allow this to open up more. Now, that probably would have been, if I had one of those, probably would have been a lot easier to install. Instead, I put a couple washers behind there, like about 3 washers, and wrapped them up in electrical tape, drilled through the hole through the middle of it, and then put those on the bolt that was in there. And that actually allows us to open up a little bit farther. Now, if you find, there might be other videos out there where people have actually taken the side panel off and actually grind away some of the metal in here, which is blocking this as well, and allows a couple more inches probably to do. This was enough for me. I didn't want to go that far, you know, to actually start grinding away things, but it can be done. But believe me, it's something worth considering, because when the door opens this far versus this far, it makes a huge difference. Now, something else you want to also consider replacing in your car are the window regulators. Now, I still have the originals in mind, but it is something I want to replace because they will go bad. They will fail at some point. Now, check on the POA, check out Tom Mills at Jefferson Auto. He has a new design for the window regulator that many other owners have put into their car. Has really proven to work much better. The old one, actually, the plastic design on it can stretch over time, and it can cause the window to not be able to lift up and down. So that is something that I'm definitely considering doing in the near future. Something to consider while I have the top up like this. This here, the rubber along here, I actually have a gap on mine. That does cause a leak. You probably are going to find your Prowler is going to have some leaks. It's just inevitable. I'm lucky because this is on the passenger side, so I normally don't have to deal with it. But definitely I've had puddles on the front of my front passenger seat here, unfortunately. So keep that in mind. Unfortunately, these, you know, the rubber, just like all rubber pieces, will start to get a little bit old. It might crack. Mine is a little bit here, but something that, keep that in mind, that it is going to happen. And tops can be replaced. They're not cheap, but something you may have to do. The next part I want to go over here are these rear stabilizers that are back here. I actually had these replaced as well. They had to be replaced for the same reason that the ones in the front had to be, because the rubber around them had started to deteriorate. I actually found these on a company called freakride.com. It's actually Control Freak Suspensions. They were kind of expensive, about 900 bucks for them, but definitely it was worth it, because before they were actually kind of twisted and really weren't holding on the wheel very well. So it was definitely worth the investment. Another thing I want to show you here is the fuel door. If you do own a Prowler, and anybody that owns one will tell you this, it can be difficult to fill it up. Due to the fact that the way just because of the position of the gas tank and the way it flows in, and also just the connections, just the size of it, it caused a lot of trouble with the gas pump will shut off multiple times. So you're gonna have to kind of get used to that. You're gonna have to hold it in certain ways, get used to it. You're probably not gonna be able to latch it and walk away. You probably have to hold it and guide it in a little bit. Some owners have actually, you have to kind of get used to it also, because your gas gauge may not always be real accurate. Now, like in my case, my gas gauge actually will tell me that I have less gas than I actually do. Now, that's probably the better part to have, because the other way around, it tells me I have more than I do. That'd be worse, and I could run out of gas, and that has happened to some owners. So that's something to just keep in mind when you're driving it. Don't let it get too low. See, get it down to about maybe even a half tank, and fill it up and see how much it takes. Again, the gas tank is 12 gallons, but what I've found sometimes is that I've actually gotten it down to 1/8 of a tank, and yet I still had like maybe 3 gallons left, 3 or 4 even. So it's just something you have to judge. Every car is going to be a little bit different. Now, this is actually a new fuel filler tube that I did order from another Prowler online member, and I haven't installed it yet, but this is supposed to be a better version of it. Supposedly some of the newer models, newer than mine, had this one that's a little bit better designed, and it's supposed to be not have that problem where your nozzle will shut off too often. I haven't put it in yet, but it is one of these things that eventually I will. I've just kind of gotten used to it, the way it handles, but it is something that I'm going to consider. If you have a newer model, you may not have that problem, but something to consider if it does bother you a lot, you might want to look into getting one of these. Something else also to consider if you've got your car recently and you haven't gotten all the fluids changed, you don't know when they've been changed. Besides the things I had done on mine, I had the oil changed, of course, the antifreeze, the power steering, transmission fluid, and that sort of thing. But one thing I didn't have, there's actually a rear housing fluid that's in here in the transmission. That's a fluid that most people probably don't even know is there. And my friend Bob Longstreth actually told me about that one. It's something to keep in mind, that's a fluid that some of the techs may not even know is there. So remind them of that. If its car hasn't ever had that changed, it's something to consider having done. Next thing I wanted to go over is actually show you this here. This is actually a second trunk release. Now, normally the car only has the one over there on the driver's side that I used before when I lowered the top. This is actually a second one that I installed. I actually was lucky. I found 2 people on the POA, or actually 3, I should say. One that was actually able to find me this switch, one that was actually had this bracket, and then a third person was actually able to find the wiring in here and actually provide the clips in that I was able to use to tie it into the existing wiring. So this is actually a very nice feature. Some people would say the trunk is so small that why would you ever use it enough that you would need it? But as you can see, I still have stuff in here, and actually it's worth it. I mean, I've actually found it much easier to be able to get out and be able to do that without having to always walk around the car to open it up. So actually this switch right here is much nicer to have than just the one. So something else I want to point out here while I'm under the trunk, there's actually something in here that Larry Lord came up with. This is actually a great idea right here. These are actually called hinge protectors. They're actually a metal piece that goes around where the hinge comes down. And it's very important to have that, because if you had anything ever actually roll down in that space and the trunk lid came down, you'd squish it, and if it was an aerosol can, it could be really bad. So this is actually a great idea, and something I would definitely recommend. It's not very expensive, and it's something they should have had in the car to begin with, and I definitely recommend it. So finally we made our way to the back of the car, and just a couple more things to show. You notice here the lettering that's on the bumpers. You can actually see it, kind of a chrome color to it. The original car didn't have any of that coloring in there. In fact, actually it's just an imprint into the bumper. This is something that I kind of wish that they'd already put in the car to begin with, but they might have left it that way so people could customize this the way they wanted. Now in my case, I've got them chrome, but I've seen other where they have it color matched. Other people actually will just repaint this entire bumper anyway, or just take them off, as I mentioned in my last video. But I like having this on here because without that, a few feet away, you can't read it. And so many people don't know what this car is, and I think it's a great idea to be able to put this in here so cars behind you can actually read it and know what this car is. So lastly, what I'm going to go over here is the trailer hitch that I put on here. So this wasn't installed on the car. Anybody that had one of these done had to have them done at the dealer or installed after the fact, and that's what I had with mine. I was very thankful. A couple different people, Steve Clark, who was a member of the POA, actually donated this trailer hitch for me. It's an aftermarket one. It wasn't one of the original Mopars, but it does work. I also had help from Ed Monahan, who was actually able to do all the, help me with the install. My son was there also to do a lot of the getting under the car and doing all the drilling in that. But he helped us out and guided us through that, so I really appreciate that. Also, I want to thank Tom Mills, because he's the one who was able to provide me the wiring harness. Now, he was lucky to be able to find an original Mopar for that one. Those are harder to find, but it definitely want to get the correct one here to be able to hook up your trailer for the lighting. So definitely an important piece. A little bit difficult to put it in there. We actually had to drill holes in the floor of the trunk to be able to route the wiring through. But really it was only about a few hours effort between my son and I. We don't have a whole lot of technical ability, but we figured it out, so if we could, probably anybody could. So the last thing I wanted to go over, but I'm starting to lose some sunlight here, so I'm probably going to do this on another video, is to go over the trailer itself. I'll pull the trailer down, I'll actually wheel it around, show you the details about it, how it hooks up on here. Other thing I'm going to go over is keep in mind that if you don't have a trailer, this trailer hitch can still help. Also, there's other accessories that have been made out there that actually allow you to have a platform here to put a suitcase or a bag or something like that to provide more storage space. Some of them, I think one version is called a weekender. Some of them are designed so they actually go over the trunk lid, so they'll fold down a little bit so you can still open the trunk. Others are not like that. There's various ones out there, and so those are other options too. And if you have the trailer hitch, you can put that in there to allow you to still travel with, a few days worth anyway. Now, if you have a really long trip, the trailer definitely is the way to go. But for smaller trips, this is something I'm actually thinking of buying at some point. So anyway, again, thank you again for watching. I appreciate it. Again, on my next video, I will go over the trailer, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.